Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
My father didn't say a single word to me all night. Not when I walked into the reception hall, not when the flight commander pinned the bar on my collar, not even when I passed him carrying my plate of food, our shoulders brushing in the tight space between the tables. Nothing. He stood off to the side next to a few retired chiefs from his old firehouse, glass of red wine in hand, playing the part of legend. They all laughed a little too hard at whatever stories he was telling. Stories I probably wasn't in. My name's Claire Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and I live outside Boise, Idaho. I fly federal search and rescue out of the Northwest Division, helicopters, mostly, Blackhawks, and Lakotas. Today was my wedding day, and he still couldn't look at me like I mattered. We'd gone through the ceremony an hour earlier, clean, tight, efficient. No fluff, no flower girls or string quartets. Just uniforms, boots, and the kind of people who ran toward burning trees and wrecked snowmobiles. I wore my flight suit. David, my husband now, wore his paramedic blues. My team walked me down the aisle. It was quiet but sharp, like us. Then came the reception. That's where it happened. We were mid-meal. David had just made me laugh by pretending to choke on a mushroom. Classic EMT humor, apparently, when my father's voice cut through the room. She's no real pilot, just a taxpayer's mistake in uniform. He said it loud enough that the table next to his stopped chewing. Someone coughed. A knife clinked against a plate. That was the only sound. I didn't move. Couldn't. My eyes locked on the red stain in his glass as it tilted just slightly in his hand. No one told him to stop. No one told him to sit down. Quick note before we keep going. Before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. Then, the bell rang. It was an old brass firehouse bell, mounted near the ceremony arch. Purely symbolic, just for show. But the moment it rang, every head turned. Commander Ellison, my old instructor, Vietnam vet, Silver Star recipient, stepped forward. Attention on deck. He waited a beat. Chief Brooks, please step forward. My chair scraped back. All eyes followed. David gave my hand one squeeze under the table, but I didn't look at him. I stood spine straight, chin level. My father's grip tightened on his wine glass, knuckles whitening. I walked the length of the room, not fast, not slow, just the right pace for a woman who had nothing left to prove. When I reached the front, I saluted the commander. His voice rang out again, clear and direct. Let the record show. When the call goes out, this is who we call. I didn't become Chief Brooks because of the applause that day, or even the insult before it. That moment at the reception, that was just the surface. Where it really began was in a house where silence could choke you harder than smoke. My dad was the fire chief of our small Oregon town for almost 25 years. He ran the department like a boot camp. Structure, routine, no room for error. At the station, guys called him Iron Brooks. At home, he was worse. There were no hugs, no idle chatter, no room for softness. He kept a clipboard on the fridge with chores listed like a deployment roster. We weren't a family. We were a schedule. I was the oldest of three. Then came Josh, then Caleb. They were his boys. That's what he always called them. He bought them matching turnout gear for Halloween when they were 5 and 6, taught them how to wrap hoses in the backyard before they could read, gave them ride-alongs by middle school. Me? I got assigned laundry duty. When I was little, my mom used to slip me cherry cough drops when I got anxious and rub my back until I fell asleep. She was the only one who ever talked like a human in that house, but she died when I was 13. Cancer, fast, and brutal. And after that, things locked down hard. No one grieved out loud. My dad buried himself in work and turned the house into a damn command post. Dinner felt like a debriefing. Eye contact was rare. I started hiding in the garage just to breathe. I remember once, maybe a month after the funeral, I said I wanted to try out for the school's science flight camp. They were offering scholarships, real competitive ones. His only response, daughters belong in support roles. Not in the front seat, I was 12. He said it flat, like he was reading it off a manual. Then he went back to prepping Caleb for his junior firefighter test, even though Caleb had just failed 2 classes. Every time one of them tripped, he was there. Pat on the back. Get up, son. Every time I won, silence. When I got straight A's, nothing. When I nailed my first solo simulator flight with the Civil Air Patrol, not a word. But when Josh forgot to change the oil in his station truck and blew the engine, my dad called it a learning experience. I used to think maybe I could earn him. Maybe if I worked harder, pushed further, he'd finally say I was enough. But by the time I was 16, I knew better. I had watched him cheer louder at junior varsity football games than he ever clapped for anything I did. So I stopped trying to be seen. And I started doing what he thought I couldn't. Before we keep going, tell me, where are you listening from? He told me I didn't belong in the field. Fine, I doubled my training hours with CAP. He told me girls don't fly helicopters. I memorized every damn flight route in a 100-mile radius. He refused to look at me like I mattered. I made sure every move I made would be undeniable. My rebellion wasn't loud. It wasn't public. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I just outworked every single expectation he placed on my brothers, and then some. I kept my mouth shut and my head down, but I was done folding. The week I won a full state aviation scholarship, one of only 3 in the district, I left the certificate sitting on the kitchen counter. He walked right past it without a glance. Meanwhile, Josh was still trying to pass his EMT basic after flunking twice, and my dad called him a natural. That kind of crap carves something deep in you. It makes your blood run hot and your voice go still. It teaches you how to keep moving even when nobody claps. I didn't need to be his favorite anymore. I just needed altitude. Altitude wasn't just something I chased, it became the only thing that made sense. By 16, I could sketch regional flight routes in my sleep. I taped aeronautical charts behind my bedroom door, folded like posters. My walls weren't covered in movie stars or makeup tutorials like the other girls at school. I had airspace grids and fire rescue extraction maps. I studied while folding laundry, ran weather reports on a secondhand laptop I'd bought with babysitting money. Then one day, I sat down across from my high school guidance counselor and told her I wanted to apply for the state's aviation school. She blinked twice like she thought I was joking. "It's competitive," she said, tapping her pen. "I know. You're, young. And it's mostly boys?" I cut her off. "Yeah." I'm aware, to her credit, she didn't fight me after that. Just nodded and said, "Okay, let's do it." When I told my dad that night, he didn't even look up from his plate, just gave this short, dry laugh. "You think they want girls in helicopters?" he said, shaking his head. "It's not a school dance, Claire." Then he stood and walked away before I could answer, so I stopped telling him anything. I trained in secret. My CAP squadron let me fly early mornings when most people were still asleep. I borrowed simulator time from a retired pilot down the road who had a rig in his basement. Said I reminded him of his daughter, who'd passed in Iraq. I'd sneak out at 4 a.m., layer up with thermal gloves, and run drills until my fingers went numb. I never asked my dad for a ride. I never needed one. I logged more flight hours than any other girl in the district, probably more than most of the guys too. I stayed out of the spotlight, didn't post anything, didn't show off. But I kept building, one mission at a time. The morning the acceptance letter came, I opened it alone in the mailbox, my breath fogging in the cold. I held the envelope like it was glass, read it twice, didn't cry, just nodded once and walked it inside. I placed it dead center on the kitchen counter, bright, bold print. State Aviation Academy, accepted. No one said a word. Josh was on the couch watching sports. Caleb was elbow deep in cereal. My dad walked past it 4 times that day. Never even glanced down. That's when it clicked. I could win the moon and drop it at his feet, and he'd still find a reason not to look up. The day I left, I packed everything myself, shoved flight logs, boots, and uniforms into a duffel I'd bought secondhand. No goodbye party, no encouragement, just silence. Right before I stepped out the door, he handed me a plain white envelope, no name on it. I opened it on the bus. Inside was $400 in 20s. And a note, scribbled in blue ink on a torn scrap of firehouse stationery. "Don't crash. No one's coming to get you." That was it. Not good luck. Not, "I'm proud of you." Just that. And weirdly, it helped, because that was the moment I stopped chasing his voice. Quick check. What city or country are you listening from today? I didn't cry on the bus. I stared out the window and watched the town get smaller behind me. The smokestacks, the engine bays, the same streets I used to bike with my mom before she got sick. I left it all behind without one damn tear. I wasn't leaving home. I was finally headed toward it. The bus pulled in just before dawn, engines hissing against the frost. I stepped off with one duffel, a paper map folded in my coat pocket, and no plan except don't screw this up. No one at aviation school cared who I was. Not one person asked where I was from or what my dad did. No one gave a damn about family names, small-town firehouses, or what I had to prove. All they cared about was, can you fly? Can you survive? Can you lead when it counts? The first couple weeks nearly broke me. My hands shook on the controls. First time I took the bird up solo, I thought I'd puke. Actually, I did puke. Twice. Motion sickness, nerves, no sleep. Take your pick. I smelled like sweat and vomit through half of ground school. But I didn't quit. While the others were still figuring out their bunk rotations, I was out on the tarmac before sunrise, walking flight lines with a flashlight. I logged every extra simulator hour they'd give me. I studied while eating. I cleaned the hangar even when it wasn't my shift. If someone bailed on a drill, I stepped in. Every time. I wasn't the loudest. I wasn't the strongest. But I was always the one still standing when the day ended. They noticed. By the second year, I was running team briefings. I earned command of a chopper unit during training ops. I was 19 and leading guys older, bigger, louder, and none of them questioned it because I got the job done. One time, we had a night drill in freezing rain, simulated rescue evacuation. The team got spooked when the visibility dropped. My co-pilot lost his nerve and nearly scrubbed the whole thing. I took the stick, finished the drill, brought the dummy in safe. Our instructor pulled me aside after and said, "You don't blink, do you?" "No, sir," I told him. Quick note. While you're listening, drop your city or country in the comments. By final term, it wasn't pretend anymore. A real distress call came in from the Cascades. Hikers stranded, snow coming down hard. One chopper already turned back. I volunteered before the radio even went silent. My crew followed without question. We found them clinging to a rock face, frostbitten and half-conscious. I held position while the medics winched down, blades chewing the air like thunder. Visibility was crap, fuel was low, but we got them all out. That mission made local news. They printed my name wrong, but I didn't care. What I remember most is the silence the next morning. Standing on the flight line, boots soaked, still in gear, looking up at the sky I'd just come down from. I didn't feel proud. I felt right. My graduation came fast after that. Ceremony was short. No speeches, no families allowed near the birds. My name was called. I stepped forward alone. There was an extra pin left on the table. Someone was supposed to do it for me. A mentor, a parent, a friend. I looked around. No one came forward, so I pinned my own wings. No tears, no photo ops, just a clean click of metal on fabric. That was the only sound. I didn't fly to prove anything to him anymore. That part of me was dead weight. I flew because it was the one place I never had to explain myself. Up there, no one asked if I belonged. They just asked if I could keep them alive. The uniform changed, but the work never stopped. I went straight from graduation into a federal search and rescue aviation task force. First deployment was hurricane cleanup in southern Texas. Half-submerged neighborhoods, power lines like spaghetti, evac routes buried in mud. We were pulling families off rooftops before FEMA could even get boots on the ground. I rotated between wildfire seasons, flood zones, search grids after tornadoes. Sleep came in patches. Meals were whatever fit in a vest pocket. My boots never dried. But I kept flying. Meanwhile, back home, both my brothers fell apart. Josh tore his ACL in a training drill and never made it past light duty. Caleb flunked out of paramedic certification after getting flagged for falsifying reports. Twice. They never talked about it. Neither did my dad. Still, anytime someone mentioned them, he lit up. "My boys," he'd say, like they were out running rescue calls in their sleep. He never said my name. Didn't matter where I was stationed. Montana, Louisiana, Oregon, Arizona. He never once picked up the phone. I didn't expect him to, but it still hit different when the silence stayed loud. During the Ash Ridge fire in Montana, we coordinated a full civilian airlift, 42 people. Elderly, children, a pregnant woman. The winds shifted so fast the ground crews were blocked. I made the call to reroute 3 Blackhawks straight into the hot zone, low and fast. We got every single one out. The agency issued a commendation. My name made the official report. I clipped the page, stuck it in an envelope, and mailed it to him. No note, just the report. It came back 2 weeks later, still sealed. His handwriting on the front, returned to sender. One of my teammates, another pilot who used to serve in a neighboring fire district, pulled me aside after a shift one night. "Saw your old man give a speech at the state chiefs conference last weekend," he said, unwrapping a protein bar. "Oh, yeah?" I kept my tone flat. "Yeah?" They asked him about his kids during the Q&A. Wanted to know if firefighting ran in the family. I said nothing, just waited. He smiled real proud and said, "My boys carry the torch." That line landed like a punch. Not because it was dramatic. It wasn't. It was the way he said it. Like it was gospel. Before we go on, tell me where you're listening from right now. Just drop your city or country in the comments. The metaphor stuck with me. The erasure burned even worse than the silence. Carry the torch. Funny how a man who raised a daughter to be invisible still acted surprised when she kept showing up in places he couldn't ignore. I didn't call him, didn't write. I didn't even tell my team what that moment did to me. I just flew harder. Put in more hours, volunteered for everything. They kept promoting me. No speeches, no plaques, just tighter clearances and tougher assignments. I was one of the youngest pilots cleared for night rescues in hostile zones. I ran dispatch out of converted barns and airfields. One time, I landed a bird on a gas station roof in Kentucky after a flash flood wiped out the highway. Still nothing from him. Every time someone asked if my family was proud, I gave them the same answer. They don't really follow what I do. It was easier than explaining what it's like to be erased while wearing the uniform they trained you to respect. I wasn't chasing him anymore. But damn if that sentence, "My boys carry the torch," didn't live rent-free in my head for months. I didn't want a church, or flowers, or pastel anything. I didn't care about centerpieces or cake flavors, or who sat next to who. When David and I decided to get married, I told him I wanted the ceremony held at the State Emergency Training Facility, concrete floors, big open space, no frills, no distractions, just the people who knew what it meant to bleed for a call sign and still show up the next day. He didn't blink, just said, "I'll wear my blues." I said, "I'll wear mine." No bridesmaids, no DJ. Just a short, clean ceremony, standing in front of the same arch used for disaster simulations and emergency ops graduations. I didn't need fairy lights. I needed a place that made sense. The decision to invite my father sat on my desk for over a week. The envelope was already addressed, stamps on it. I kept staring at it, wondering what kind of peace offering that even was. David didn't push, just said, "Whatever you choose, I'll back you." In the end, I dropped it in the mailbox without a note, just a standard RSVP card and a copy of the invite. 3 weeks later, it came back. His handwriting, all block caps, like a damn inventory form. Attending. One guest. No name, no message, just cold data. I stood in the kitchen reading it, feeling nothing. No surprise, no anger, just familiar. My team didn't hesitate when I told them I'd be walking solo. Before I could finish the sentence, Danny, my co-pilot on 3 Ops, said, "No, you're not." A chorus of "We got you" followed. Rescue pilots, paramedics, field engineers, people who'd seen me fly into literal hell zones, lined up without ceremony, without question. They weren't there to play family. They were family. We kept everything tight, on schedule. The chairs were cleanly lined up on the asphalt behind the main facility. Radios muted, boots shined, no flowers, no music. Just clipped comms and sharp uniforms. Right before the doors opened, I adjusted my collar, checked my boots, and took one last deep breath. Quick check-in. What part of the world are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. Then the doors opened, and the guests rose. Not because someone told them to, not because of tradition, but because respect moved faster than instructions. They didn't see a bride. They saw a chief. They saw the flight suit, the insignia, the scars we didn't wear on our sleeves but carried just the same. I walked through that crowd with my crew on both sides, shoulders squared, eyes forward. Out of the corner of my vision, I saw him, my father, sitting in the second row, arms crossed, jaw tight. He didn't stand, didn't nod, didn't move, and I didn't care, because every step I took was carried by people who had already stood with me, in the mud, in the smoke, in the sky. He didn't speak to me once, not during the photos, not during the lineup, not when David's mother hugged me and said she'd never seen a more beautiful bride. My father posted up at the back of the reception hall, shoulders tight with pride that didn't belong to me, surrounded by other retired chiefs, all of them nodding and laughing like it was some reunion tour. He wore his old station badge on his lapel. Not a compliment, not a glance. The medals on my chest may as well have been air. I caught pieces of their conversation. Equipment upgrades, mutual aid response times, something about a training disaster in Spokane. He was talking like he still had a crew, like the last 20 years hadn't moved on without him. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even look his way again. We moved through the reception with quiet efficiency, speeches, toasts, meals plated, and passed. David's captain told a funny story about the first time we met on a flooded highway. Someone laughed too hard and spilled a drink. Light, clean, controlled, and then it happened. Mid-meal, in the pause between bites and sips, his voice cut across the table like a knife. "She's no real pilot, just a failure in uniform." It was loud enough to carry. The room froze. Wine glasses stopped mid-air. Forks hovered. A saxophonist missed a beat so sharp it made someone flinch. Chairs creaked as people turned their heads. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Heat burned up the back of my neck like a flare. David looked at me, jaw tight, but didn't speak. My crew caught it too. Danny's hand balled into a fist under the table. One of our techs leaned forward like he was ready to stand, but I held still. I stared at the far wall like there was nothing to react to, like the words hadn't landed at all. Quick pause. Tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. City or country? Drop it in the comments. Then the bell rang. A sharp, clear clang that cracked the tension like thunder. Everyone turned. The old brass firehouse bell near the ceremony arch had been polished that morning by one of the rookies. We weren't even going to use it. It was supposed to be decorative. But when it rang, every conversation died. Commander Ellison, my old instructor, one of the most decorated aviators in the Northwest, stepped to the mic. His voice was gravel and steel. "Attention on deck." That phrase hit the room like a command from God. Chairs scraped back. Uniforms straightened. Even the waitstaff froze. "Chief Brooks," he said, "please step forward." The silence was instant and full. I stood. My father didn't look at me, but I felt him shift. The weight of what he'd said still hung in the air like smoke. I didn't hesitate. One step, then another. Boots hitting concrete, slow and steady. The hem of my flight dress brushed the floor as I moved down the center aisle. People stepped aside. David stayed seated. His eyes followed, but he didn't try to hold me back. My heart pounded like rotor blades, but I kept my shoulders square. This wasn't rage, it wasn't pain, it was control. I walked toward the front of the room, not to answer my father, not to justify a damn thing, but because the commander had called for me, and I was still the kind of pilot who answered when called. Commander Ellison stepped back from the mic just as I reached him. I stood at attention, heels together, hands behind my back. My heart was steady. My breath was slow. Everything I needed to be had already kicked in. Not for ceremony, not for revenge, but for clarity. Ellison looked me square in the eye. His voice didn't need a mic. "Chief Brooks has led more high-risk extractions in the last 5 years than any other pilot in her division," he said. "Storm rescues, mountain airlifts, 2 civilian extractions in international conflict zones." I caught a flicker of movement from the back of the room. My father turned toward me, just slightly, his mouth open like he was going to speak. But nothing came out. Ellison continued. "She's flown through electrical storms, zero visibility smoke, and hostile terrain. She's never missed a drop point, never lost a team member, never once asked for recognition. I stood still. Every word hit harder than anything he could have said with a medal or a plaque. This was no favor, no courtesy, it was a record. "When lives are on the line," Ellison said, his voice sharp now, clear enough to slice the air, "we call her." Silence held for a beat. Then someone clapped. One slow clap, then another, then 5. And then the room shifted. The applause wasn't polite, it wasn't planned. It built like fire catching dry grass. Raw, rising, unscripted. David was the first to stand. Then Danny, then 2 of our former cadets, both in dress uniform. Then a field tech who'd flown with me in Alaska, a paramedic from Colorado, a guy I'd medevaced out with a busted hip in Utah. A firefighter near the back stood up on a prosthetic foot and tapped it twice against the floor. That sound, tap, tap, hit me harder than the clapping. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. We both knew what it meant. Everyone was on their feet now, except for him. My father didn't move, didn't clap, didn't shift in his chair. His eyes were on me, but they weren't hard anymore. They weren't cold. He just looked lost, like he'd walked into a room full of strangers and suddenly realized none of them looked back at him like they used to. He blinked, looked down at his wine glass. A single drop had spilled over the rim and was sliding slowly down the front of his dress shirt, deep red, soaking through the white cotton. Still, he said nothing. He set the glass down on the edge of the table with slow, careful hands. No dramatics, no last words. Then he stood. Not fast, not angry, just done. He turned and walked toward the exit, past rows of people still standing, past a crowd that no longer looked at him with reverence. No apology, no goodbye. He just left. And I didn't follow. I didn't call out, didn't watch the door close, because I didn't need to. Quick note, if you've made it this far, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The silence he used to control me had lost its grip. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel sadness. I felt the weight shift. All those years I spent waiting for his voice, for the nod, the praise, the pat on the back, they didn't matter anymore. Because every person standing in that room, every hand clapping, every eye locked on mine, that was earned, not handed down, not claimed by blood. Respect had found its rightful place, and it wasn't with him. Later that night, after the last chair was stacked and the gear stowed, David sat on the edge of the bed, waiting. He didn't speak, just reached down and started unlacing my boots. Slow, steady, like he knew I was still mid-mission. I stared at the floor. My knees hurt, my back ached, my chest was tight in ways that had nothing to do with the uniform. He called me a failure, I said. David didn't flinch, just looked up, quiet. Do you believe that? He asked. I looked at my flight suit draped over the chair, the medals still pinned, the name tag, the patchwork of operations I'd flown stacked like ghosts across my memory. No, I said. That was the only word that fit. Weeks passed. I flew 2 rotations out west, helped with fire evac drills in Utah. I didn't hear from my father, didn't expect to. Then a photo showed up in the mail. No return address, no note, just a single snapshot. It was the ceremony lawn. Empty chairs, sunlight hitting the arch just right. And in the far corner, near the trees, half shadowed by a flagpole, my father, watching, not standing proud, not front and center, just there. I stared at that photo for 10 minutes before setting it face down in a drawer. Didn't frame it, didn't throw it away, just kept it quiet. A few months later, I spoke at a state emergency leadership conference. Packed crowd, mostly chiefs, agency heads, logistics officers. My session was on rapid evac protocols, clean, technical, no fluff. As the room cleared, I saw him, back wall. Still, when everyone else had gone, he stepped forward. Not fast, not hesitant, just deliberate. He stopped about 5 feet from me. No badge, no uniform, just a plain gray shirt and tired eyes. Ma'am, he said, voice low. You did good. I didn't answer, just watched him. I didn't know how to show up for a daughter in uniform, he added. The silence between us filled the whole room. Then I reached out and shook his hand. Not forgiveness, not reunion, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. Later that night, back at the hotel, I found a letter slid under the door. His handwriting, just one line. You were always in command. I just never knew how to salute. I didn't need it, didn't cry, didn't call him. But I folded it once, clean and sharp, and placed it in the same drawer as the photo. Because I knew finally I didn't have to carry his silence anymore.